then the trade war advantage.
What do you think that means is going to happen in the 1NR? All right.
Okay. Is anybody not ready? Okay. So. The China advantage. At the top, this advantage is asinine. There are too many alt causes to US-China relations. Extend 1 and see number 3. The Lingwall F-15 evidence says that surveillance, island fights in Asia, and US military presence in Japan and South Korea all make a true resolution of relations impossible. They give 3 subpoints answering this, but all 3 of them are functionally the same argument, that is an assertion that Japan and South Korea are not important to China's core interests. China has explicitly made moves to capture islands in the South China Sea and other areas in East Asia, and unless those territorial disputes can be resolved, you should be extremely skeptical of their solvency. This proves that the app might be necessary, but they will have a very difficult time that proves that they are sufficient to solve the advantage, unless they read a card that says that ending arms sales overcomes every other issue that China cares about in relations. And we will read more evidence. The plan doesn't solve China's other claims, and the relationship has more beef. Raymond 14. Abandoning Taiwan would fail to ameliorate the Sino-US relationship. Core issues extend far beyond Taiwan, like cyber espionage and human rights. China claims to not end with Taiwan. One should not surmise that Sino-US strategic competition would abate were the Taiwan issue to be resolved. And there are too many other points of tension, easily 16. Points of friction in the US-China relations abound. From trade disputes to financial governance, abandoning Taiwan will not stop Taiwan military modernization, anti-access/area denial development, or the targeting of US bases in Japan and South Korea. Even if Taiwan were no longer a subject of disagreement, Chinese internal debates tend to paint the US as a global competitor. And all of China's interests are directly opposed to that of the US. Wang 11. Another assumption for abandoning Taiwan is that by doing so, Washington can resolve differences with Beijing. Those who made such a call assumed that Taiwan is the only irritant in US-China relations. They ignore the changing power structure in the international system. Making concessions on one issue does not mean that the hegemon and the challenger can live happily ever after, because each state acts according to its own interests. Significant differences exist in a host of issues, including Tibet, trade, currency value, and US forward military deployment. And the Taiwan Relations Act's gut solvency. Extend 1 and see number 4, which was the analytic. The US has tons of informal, non-diplomatic relations with Taiwan aside from arms sales, and those relations means that the US will continue to come to the defense of Taiwan in the event of a war. The act can't remove the historical reasons that the US is close to Taiwan, which prevents the US from ever developing strong relations with China. Their first answer was recency. That is non-responsive. So long as the Taiwan Relations Act is on the book, we will never be able to resolve relations with Taiwan. It also does not turn the deterrence. To this end, because decreasing arms sales still causes a deterrence to subside. And go to the deterrence turn now. Ending arms sales destroys deterrence and causes China to implement salami slicing in the East and South China Seas. Extend 1 and see number 7. The easily evidence says that any decline in arms sales would embolden China to make claims in contested regions more assertively. It would increase Chinese interest over Taiwan and convince Taiwanese leaders that they should go along with any of those contested claims that China makes because they have reduced leverage. This is offense and outweighs and turns the act. First is time frame. Deterrence breakdown immediately signals weakness to China, which would cause a war. It's far faster than the act, which would require a total rebuild of US-China relations. Overcoming every issue in the relationship would take decades. Second, it turns the case. China would be less likely to be nice to the US if it thinks that they could win a war with the US. And it makes them less willing to come to the table on a trade deal, which means that it turns advantage too, as well. Their first argument was that the plan is not total removal of recognition. For them to solve Taiwan relations, they have to be, even if they don't totally remove recognition, they do have to be a total rebuild of the US-China relationship, which requires getting rid of all arms sales. And the 1 and see piece of evidence explicitly says why arms sales are key to deterrence. Second, they say that incremental reductions solve the link to the disadvantage. The first piece of Gomez evidence says that Taiwan could improve its defenses. It does not say that Taiwan would be able to defend itself at the same level as high-tech US weapons. The second piece of Gomez evidence says that we can monitor China's advances. That would be true, except there's nothing the US could do if China was especially aggressive, because the plan mandates the end of arms sales. And arms sales deter conflict. This is Wang 19. Approved new arms sales to China is in the interest of the US to strengthen Taiwan's defense capabilities. The best way to defend the island is to ensure that it can defend itself and that self-defense capabilities are never eroded. By doing so, the US will ensure that Beijing does not miscalculate. And arms sales are key to deter China. This is Chang 18. The new arms sales will help Taiwan maintain credibility. Preserving Taiwan's ability to maintain control of its own airspace will be vital. As Taiwan's most vital partner, the US must push back against Chinese encroachment. If it does not, no one else will. Finally, they say that China is not a threat. The swayed evidence says that we should trust China because they are not revisionists. That is totally wrong. We should never trust them, and we should never stop arms sales. Here's a piece of qualified evidence that supports that bold claim that I just made, easily 16. Glaser contrasts his defensive realist approach with offensive realism. Without convincing evidence that Chinese names are limited and that nationalism is under control, it is unclear why a defensive realist approach should be assumed rather than tested. The literature suggests that appeasement usually fails. Its benefits tend not to last. Efforts may have incentives to hold the line early to preempt its use of salami tactics and avoid engaging in future conflict. Now onto the trade advantage. There are far too many alt causes to a trade deal for the act to be able to solve. Extend 1 and see number 1. The Cusick evidence says that there is a wide gap that separates the two countries and that Trump's insistence on America first prevents a trade deal from ever being reached. They just re-highlight this evidence and say that Cusick is an AFCAR. This re-highlighting does not make any sense. The first line of it says that a major flashpoint between the US and China is Taiwan. Just a major flashpoint does not assume that there are other major flashpoints like the South China Sea and Trump's insistence on America first. And military frictions and scandals that way. Dixon and Lee 19. Even if the two sides can strike a deal on trade, US-China relations have changed fundamentally, and there's no going back. Military friction, espionage scandals, China's rising military strength, and the battle against Chinese tech giant Huawei are all signs of an ominous chill in relations. And the American first competitiveness mindset means that the US and China will never agree. Dixon and Lee 510. Trade was only a sideshow in the confrontation between the US and China. The real issue was the US fear that China would catch up in high-tech fields. The deeper problem is economic and tech competition. The two countries don't trust each other. And the plan kept mandate resolution of the dispute. Extend 1 and see number 2, which was the analytic. The US has tariffs in place and demands the end of Chinese IP theft, which the plan can't resolve. If arms sales go away, the reasons the dispute is happening would remain on the books. They say that the US and China are ready to move ahead on talks now. This is false. It is a misrepresentation of any of their 1AC evidence, because they don't have a single card that says that they are willing to move ahead on those talks in the status quo. They also say that territory answers these arguments. If giving up on territorial disputes would build relations, it would not increase the likelihood of a trade deal, because the US still has other contentious claims that China does not like disputes in the South China Sea. And there's no trade deal. Structural factors means that China have little incentive to change. Extend 1 and see number 3. The right evidence says that China is unlikely to end industrial subsidies or increase enforcement of IP, since they know that their economy depends on that. I answered the arguments that they made to this above. And China won't accept economic changes, which means that no deal will happen. Peterson 5-7. The US negotiators want to limit the support of the Chinese government. China doesn't want to do most of the thing America wants it to do. Changes to the country's economic model are no small thing when they're demanded by outsiders. US-China trade agreements have often had the staying power of a dew on a summer's verse. And economic decline does not cause war. The Dresser evidence cites the largest data set and says that the 2008 conflict did not cause protectionist nationalism or ethnic exclusion. Their answer was that it's too old. However, it is about the most recent financial crash, which means that it's very relevant. They also say that Syria and Yemen disproved the example, but those are irrelevant because those were not wars caused by economic decline.
Okay, so you have heard multiple arguments about why the US and China relationship is eroded. Or Advantage states that those strained tensions are great arguments for why the new Taiwan deal will tip us into war. What part of the China advantage do you believe required us winning if we revive US-China relations?
I disagree with the assertion that you're making there. Our argument is that there are other reasons that China will be willing to go to a war with the US besides just Taiwan.
What piece of evidence do you have that says that they will go to war?
I think the 1 and C easily evidence establishes that. I think the Raymond card establishes that because it talks about
so the
other
Raymond
claims
card
that
is from
China's made.
2014. If
Correct.
these are really just overwhelming reasons to go to war, why haven't we in the past 5 years?
I think the same could apply to you because we've had arms sales for 40 years and we haven't gone to war.
Yeah,
with
our
Taiwan.
argument is other, right? I don't understand what you mean by that.
I mean, if to
So we
answer
we've
the
had
deterrence,
arms sales.
if to answer the deterrence dissent, you want to concede that there's no risk of China war, that would be true.
No.
But our argument is that since China is inevitably aggressive, any decline in U.S. deterrence means that they would, if we give an inch, they would take a mile from their territorial
That
limits.
argument seems to sort of contradict the Taiwan relations argument that you make about how, quote, we still have tons of informal, non-diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Why wouldn't those deter China?
Because they're not military relations. So even if
Okay,
like
so it's no longer just like any action would deter China, it's specifically only military action.
well, sure. We've given a bunch of all causes on military issues that we think are also important.
Okay,
However, we've read evidence that's specific to the way that arms sales deter Taiwan deter China because it means that China knows that Taiwan would be able to defend themselves from any
Okay,
incursions.
that makes sense. In the status quo, does the United States have the military capability to stop Chinese salami slicing in the East and South China Seas?
We would say that they do. However, arms sales impede that.
Why?
Because arms sales enable the U.S. and Taiwan to work more effectively on defense, but
So
without
Taiwan
having
is
the
key.
capabilities to push
Taiwan
back.
is key to stopping China in the
Yes,
East and South
absolutely.
China Seas.
Taiwan's like the closest to those regions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So on the trade advantage, do you have a piece of evidence that assumes a world post-ending arms sales with Taiwan?
No.
Okay, so all of your evidence is just about these status quo discussions that are happening in trade
Correct.
deals?
All of our evidence says that you are mischaracterizing what the real dispute is about. You might have a couple of cards that say that Taiwan is a sticking point in
Do you
the
have a
trade
card that
talks.
says that Taiwan is not a sticking point?
Yes, because we have cards that say
Which
that
one?
the real sticking point is the
No,
economic changes
mention
that-
Taiwan, it's just external reasons that
We
they're
have-
arguing about in
Right.
trade deals.
We have cards that say that the trade dispute is literally about whether or not China will make changes to its economy, like getting rid of industrial subsidies and putting protections on
Okay.
IT. That's what the dispute is about. It's not about Taiwan at all.